My name is Anthony, and I'm a former mafioso. Not the kind from movies with fancy suits and romance, but the real deal. I was sitting in the back seat of a car when my friend took care of a guy right in the parking lot of a pizzeria. I raised glasses at weddings where the groom had a very dark past, and the witnesses were cops who saw everything and chose to stay silent. I said goodbye to friends that the police didn't even bother looking for. Now I live in a small house in Colorado. No one knows who I am. I grow vegetables, walk my dog, and drink cheap coffee at the local diner. But every night, I wait to see an old black Chevy with tinted windows slowly cruising past my house. People like that don't forget, ever. I was born in New Jersey, in Hoboken. If you're from the States, you know. It's a place where the smell of Italian food mixes with gasoline and sea air. My dad worked at the port, my mom was a waitress. Money was barely enough, we wore shoes until they had holes. In our neighborhood, there were two types of guys, those who dreamed of getting out and those who had already given up. But we always had the big guys, dudes in expensive suits who sat at corner tables in restaurants, left $100 tips, and drove Cadillacs. Everyone knew who they were, but no one said it out loud. At 15, my friend Joey said, "Tony, wanna make some cash? It's simple." My job was to stand on the corner and whistle if the cops showed up. I didn't understand what the guys were doing back then. For me, it was just work. But when I got $100 for 20 minutes, I realized these were totally different dollars than what my dad made in a week. Then I became a messenger. Envelopes, bags, packages. They always told me, don't ask questions, and I didn't. One day, the bar owner where I delivered an envelope poured me a Coke and said, "Remember, kid, serious people value reliability." I remembered those words for life. By 16, I had new sneakers, Levi's jeans, and a Casio watch. At school, I looked like a cool guy. Teachers asked, "Anthony, where do you work?" I smirked, "Helping at the pizzeria." But in reality, I was already transporting money from underground games. There was cigarette smoke, cheap whiskey, and people who never smiled just for the hell of it. One of the big ones, Salvator, once slapped me on the shoulder. "You're doing good, you've got a future." For the first time, I felt proud that I'd been noticed. But this life wasn't just about money. I'll never forget the night when Joey and I were sitting in the basement of a bar and heard loud noises upstairs. I wanted to go up, but he squeezed my shoulder. "Sit, don't stick your neck out." A few minutes later, everything went quiet. Salvator came down. His face was calm, like nothing happened. He looked at us and said, "Guys, remember, in our world, silence is worth more than gold." And that's when I first realized this wasn't a game at all. Questions from Reddit. Were you scared in your youth? Every day. But in that world, fear was like air. It was always there. If you showed it, you were dead. I learned to smile even when my heart was pounding so hard I wanted to run. Why didn't you leave back then? Because money, respect, and the feeling of being part of something big, it's like a drug. You don't realize you're hooked, and at 17, you think you're immortal. My first real assignment involved a talk. One guy owed the family a big sum. Three of us, me, Joey, and an older guy named Frankie, were sent to remind him. We went to his auto shop. Frankie was smiling, speaking softly. "Listen, we're friends, right? But a debt's a debt. You owe the family." The guy hemmed and hawed, said he'd pay soon. Then Frankie grabbed a wrench and smashed it into the hood of a car. "See, next time it won't be metal that gets hurt." I stood there and for the first time felt like we were playing for real. But when we left, Frankie slipped me $20 and said, "Good job, you didn't flinch." I walked home thinking, this is wrong. But inside, another voice said, now I'm one of them. When you're 17 and your pocket has more money than your parents saw in a month, you feel like a king. I could walk into any pizzeria and the waiters knew my name. I could spend an evening in a bar, and even grown men would raise a glass to me. But with that came responsibility. The people giving me money weren't charities. Every bill meant a debt. And one day I realized I was neck deep in this life. At first it was small stuff. Deliver an envelope, drive a package, pass a message. Then they started giving harder tasks. For example, go to the next town, meet a guy and bring him back. Seems simple, right? But only if you don't know that this guy owes the family a ton, and the meeting could turn into anything. That's when I first realized, even a simple drive could end with you not coming home. One evening, Frankie, Joey, and I went to a small shop. The owner was late on a payment. Frankie spoke calmly, almost friendly, but the owner tried to argue. Frankie sighed, walked to the counter, and slammed his fist on it. The glass cracked. "See, buddy, things break fast, but we don't want anything breaking on you, so be smart." The owner got the hint right away. That's when I first saw that in this world, words were valued no less than actions, sometimes more. Questions from Reddit. Were there situations where you were really scared? Constantly, even in moments when nothing was happening. Fear was part of everyday life. You walk down the street and you're looking over your shoulder, sitting in a bar and thinking who's watching you. What was the most important thing you learned in your youth? That you can only trust those who are in the dirt with you. Everyone else smiles as long as it's beneficial to them. I was often sent to Salvador. He was a man everyone respected. He could sit in a cafe, drink espresso, talk baseball, and a whole crowd would gather around him like he was a magnet. One day he told me, "Anthony, remember, in our business the main thing is to be reliable. Money comes and goes, power is here today, gone tomorrow. But if people know they can trust you, you'll stay afloat." Those words became my rule. I wasn't the strongest, not the smartest, but I was reliable. 18 years old. I got an assignment, drive a car to Brooklyn. Nothing special, they said. I got behind the wheel, but as soon as I hit the highway, my heart sank. The car was someone else's. I knew something was in the trunk. I didn't ask questions, but I knew for sure it wasn't just tools. Every traffic light felt like a trap. Every cop car passing by, a sentence. When I finally handed over the keys to Salvador, he looked at me and smiled. "See, kid, now you've taken a step forward." I realized there's no going back. My first big event was a wedding. Not mine, of course, I was just invited. But it was the wedding of one of the family guys. Everything was there. Expensive suits, music, dancing, champagne. But the main thing was the atmosphere. In the hall sat people you'd never see together in normal life. Politicians, businessmen, guys from the neighborhoods, all together, all smiling like best friends. I sat at the table and realized this wasn't just a celebration. It was a show of power. Every toast was about loyalty, not love. Every gift a reminder of debts. Where there's money and power, there's always betrayal. In our neighborhood, there was a guy named Lucas. He'd been with us since childhood but decided to play both sides. First, we noticed the money didn't add up. Then rumors started that he was talking to outsiders. Frankie once told me, "See, Anthony, in our world, the main things are silence and loyalty. If you break one of those rules, you're gone." I don't know what happened to Lucas. I just never saw him again. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever regret getting involved? Yes, but even then I understood. You can't just walk away. You're either in or out of the game forever. What was the most tense moment at that stage? The first drive with the trunk. I thought my heart would jump out of my chest, but those moments show if you're ready to go further. By 20, I wasn't just an errand boy anymore. I was part of the chain. People knew my name. I could walk into a bar, and grown men who ignored me yesterday would nod. But with that came the feeling. I was getting deeper and deeper. Every day I woke up thinking, what if today is the last? And one day I realized my life no longer belonged to me. It belonged to the family. The first big assignment. I was 21 when Salvatore called me to him. We sat in his favorite cafe, he drank espresso, and I nervously twisted a glass of water. "Anthony," he said, "it's time to test you for real." The task sounded simple. Go to the next town, meet the cargo, and make sure it gets where it needs to. I nodded, though everything inside me clenched. I already understood. Such assignments are rarely simple. That night we drove in a convoy, 3 cars, 2 in each. On the outside, regular guys in suits, but the tension was palpable even through closed windows. Every turn of the road felt like a test, every oncoming van a threat. We delivered the cargo, everything went smooth. But that evening I realized, now I'm not just an errand boy. Now I'm part of the real game. From that point, totally different sums entered my life. I no longer carried pocket change. Now I had stacks of bills. I could afford a car, a real one, shiny with leather interior. I could go to a restaurant and leave a tip equal to what my mom made in a day. But with the money came a new reality. I couldn't just stroll around the neighborhood anymore. I couldn't sit in a bar without looking around. Respect had a price, and you had to pay every day. The first time I noticed guys in suits near our bar. They didn't come in, just stood on the corner and watched. A couple days later, they showed up again, but in a different spot. Frankie said, "See, Tony, those are feds. They're always around. Smile at them. They know who we are anyway." I pretended not to notice, but inside everything boiled. I realized our life isn't just us and our rules. Somewhere nearby, there were always people patiently piecing together the puzzle. Questions from Reddit. Did you know you were being watched? Yes, we all knew. Sometimes they even showed themselves on purpose as a reminder that they're there. It was psychological pressure. Were you afraid of the feds? More than anyone, because from our own, you at least know what to expect, but feds could destroy everything in one day. I remember an evening in an Italian restaurant in Jersey. Big table, all the family guys, laughter, talks. Suddenly, 2 men in suits walked into the hall, sat at a separate table, ordered coffee. We all knew who they were. They sat, smiled, pretended to enjoy dinner, and we pretended they weren't there. Salvatore just quietly said, "Let them watch, let them see we're not afraid." But I felt it. Every glance from them was like a knife in the back. I started wondering, what's next? Yeah, I had money. Yeah, I felt respect, but it was all built on sand. Every night I went to bed thinking, what if the feds pick me up tomorrow? Or worse, what if our own decide I'm unreliable? The family gave me everything, but at any moment it could take away my life and freedom. One day Salvatore called me. "Anthony," he said seriously, "you have to remember, we don't do half measures. If you're in, you're into the end. If you're wavering, you've already lost." Those words stuck in my memory. I nodded, though inside everything screamed. I understood I was already wavering. The story with the friend. One guy from the neighboring district decided he could work for 2 bosses. He started leaking info to the feds. One evening, he just disappeared. No one asked questions. No one said his name. I sat and thought, that's the whole fate. One wrong move and you're gone. Questions from Reddit. Was there a feeling that there's no way out? Constantly. I was like in a cage, only the cage was made of gold. Everything shines, but you're still a prisoner. Why did you keep going? Because leaving meant signing your own death warrant. You could only exit one way, feet first. My mom didn't know what I did, or rather she guessed but stayed silent. One day she looked at me and said, "Anthony, I'm glad you have everything now, but sometimes it feels like I'm losing you." I smiled and said, "Mom, everything's fine." But inside I felt, she's right. I wasn't the kid who ran around the neighborhood with a ball anymore. I'd become part of a world with no way back. By 23, I already understood. My future was either prison or the grave. But I kept going, because at that moment I simply had no choice. Big money, big risks. By 25, I had a life many dreamed of. Car with leather seats, custom suits, watches worth thousands. I'd walk into restaurants, and waiters would set the best table right away. But behind every smile was calculation. Behind every glass of wine, a reminder that tomorrow might not come. At that time, we had serious business. No more small errands and drives. Now I saw the real kitchen of the family. Deals, negotiations, dividing spheres of influence. One time, we were sent to a meeting in an old motel on the outskirts of New York. Outside, it looked like it would fall apart from one strong wind. We entered the room. Inside sat two guys, outsiders, smiling, extending hands, but tension hung in the air. The talk was about money, a lot of money. I sat in the corner, silent, listening, and suddenly realized one wrong word and this room becomes someone's last. Luckily, it ended with a handshake and verbal promises. But as we drove back, I felt for the first time, we live on the edge. One move and your whole life collapses. Questions from Reddit. What was the most tense thing in such meetings? That no one spoke directly. Every word had a double meaning. A smile could mean friendship or a hint of threat. Did you ever see such negotiations end badly? I can't talk about it straight, but let's say some of those who sat at the table never showed up at meetings again. The more money circulated in the family, the more often I saw guys in suits. They appeared at bars, parking lots, near restaurants. Sometimes they just stood and smoked, sometimes came in and sat at the next table. One morning, a man in an expensive coat approached me. "Anthony," he said, "you're a smart guy. You understand where this is all heading." I pretended not to get it and walked past, but inside everything trembled. I realized they'd come for me personally. Soon I was called to the station, formally as a witness. In the room sat two agents. They smiled like we were old friends. "Anthony," one said, "we know who you are. We know what you do. You still have a chance. Just help us and we'll help you." I smiled and replied, "Gentlemen, I'm just a guy who helps at the pizzeria." They exchanged glances. One said, "You're wasting time. We won't forget this conversation." When I left the station, it felt like there was a target on my back. I told Frankie everything. He looked at me seriously. "Remember, Tony, feds are like shadows. They're always there, but if they find out you talk to them too long, that's it, you're dead." I nodded, but inside I understood I was between two fires. At one of the dinners, Salvatore raised a glass and said, "In our world, the main thing is loyalty. Everything else can be bought or taken. But if you don't have loyalty, you have nothing." I felt his gaze stop on me. Maybe it was coincidence, or maybe he already knew the feds had tried to talk to me. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever think about making a deal with the feds? I did. Any normal person thinks about saving themselves, but the price was too high. In our world, you pay for such thoughts quickly and without talk. How did you handle the pressure? Honestly, alcohol, sleepless nights, and constant paranoia. I smiled during the day and couldn't sleep at night. One evening I was heading home. Near my entrance stood a black Chevrolet, tinted windows. The car wasn't moving. I walked past, pretended not to notice, but my heart pounded so hard it seemed the whole neighborhood could hear. I went up to my place, looked out the window. The car stood there for another hour, then left. From then on, every evening I waited for it to return. I started to understand. My life had turned into a vicious circle. On one side, feds who wanted to break the family. On the other, the family that didn't forgive mistakes. I was trapped, and I saw no way out. In the criminal world, there's a rule. If it's too quiet around you, something's already brewing. After that meeting with the feds, I felt the ground slipping away. Frankie was still around, but his looks changed, seemingly friendly but with a shade of wariness. And Salvador often just stayed silent, watching me at family dinners. I understood they suspected something. One evening I got a call. The voice was short and cold. "Tomorrow, midnight, warehouse on the Brooklyn waterfront." No explanations, no details. In our world, such invitations could mean anything, from a regular task to the last ride. I went. The old brick warehouse looked dead. Inside, dim light, smell of damp and metal. I entered and immediately noticed them: Frankie, Salvador, and three more seniors. Salvador sat at the table, twirling a glass of whiskey. His eyes were cold as ice. "Anthony," he said, "we have questions for you." "We've heard rumors," Salvador continued. "Feds have been interested in you. They say they already know your name." I felt everything inside go cold, but my voice stayed calm. "Rumors are always flying. I stay away from them." Frankie was silent, but his gaze pierced me like a knife. Salvador stood up, came closer. "We want to make sure you're still with us." They brought in a guy, young, about 20, shaking like a leaf. I didn't know him. "This guy worked with us, but seems he decided to talk too much," said Salvador. "If you're with us, Anthony, prove it." I understood what was happening. They wanted me to do something with no way back. It was a test. My head buzzed. My heart pounded so hard it drowned out everything. I looked at Frankie. His face was stone, but in his eyes I caught something. Maybe regret, maybe a warning. I approached the guy. He whispered something, prayed, eyes full of fear. At that moment I realized, if I do this, I'll never be able to leave this world. Ever. But if I don't, it's the end for me. I closed my eyes and made a choice. When it was over, Salvador smiled and slapped me on the shoulder. "Good work, Anthony. You're still one of us." But inside I felt emptiness. This wasn't a victory. It was a trap. Now I was tied to them stronger than ever. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever regret that moment? Every day. That evening I realized I'd lost part of myself. I made a choice, and it changed my life forever. Could you have refused? No, in our world, refusal is a death sentence. I got home at dawn, sat on the bed, looked in the mirror. The reflection was the same guy in a suit and expensive watch, but inside I was different. For the first time ever I felt, I don't control my life, I'm a prisoner. And that's when the thought of escape first formed in me. After that night at the warehouse, I started having dreams. They were like black and white frames, empty streets, silhouettes of people I'd never meet again, and the hum of cars outside the window. I'd wake up in a cold sweat and stare at the phone. What if a call? What if an invitation to another warehouse? I couldn't live like that anymore. I realized, if I don't leave now, I'll stay forever. A week after the test, I got a strange note. It was under the door, just one word: soon. No signature, but I knew who it was from. That evening when I left the bar, a gray Crown Victoria stopped near me. The window rolled down, and I saw that same agent in the coat. "You don't have much time," he said. "You know what's waiting for you. Help us, and maybe you'll get out alive." I stayed silent, but this time there was no anger inside me, just the thought, what if? I met Frankie at his favorite cafe. We sat by the window, drank coffee. He looked out at the street. I looked at him. "You've changed, Tony," he said finally. "I see it. You've become thoughtful." I smirked. "Getting old, I guess." He was silent for a long time, then added, "In our world, they don't let you get old. Remember that." His words were like a warning. I understood. He sensed I was already thinking about escape. I started gathering information. Money, documents, contacts, all quietly, carefully. I knew the slightest mistake, and they'd find me before I could take the first step. I opened a secret account, rented an apartment on the other side of the city, told no one. At night, I'd sit in the kitchen with a map, trace routes, think how to leave unnoticed. Questions from Reddit. Why didn't you immediately agree to work with the feds? Because it's not a game. You can't just sign a paper and disappear. It means living under a false name, without family, without a past. It means your life will never be the same. Did you think the family would find out? I thought about it every day. I lived like there was a shadow behind me. One night, I finally went to meet the agents. We sat in a car by a dark park. You understand that if we start, there's no way back? Asked the agent. I understand, I said, but I have conditions. I won't say what exactly we agreed on even now. But then, for the first time, I felt there might be a chance. A few days later, Salvatore called me to him. Anthony, he said, we have too many leaks, too many talks. You know how this could end. I nodded. His gaze was heavy, but he said nothing more. Just let me go. I understood. He wasn't sure yet, but he sensed something. We met on the roof of an old building, looked at the city lights. Tell me honestly, Tony, he said, you're planning something. I stayed silent. He sighed. I won't rat you out, but you know this will end badly. I looked at him. Maybe, but I'm tired. We stood in silence. That was probably our last real conversation. I packed my things, money, documents, clothes, everything I could carry. Left at night. The city was asleep, but it felt like eyes were behind every corner. I got in the car and drove. Familiar streets flashed by outside. The bar where I sat with Frankie, the restaurant where we met with Salvatore, all of it stayed behind. Ahead, uncertainty, but I was ready. Questions from Reddit. Were you scared at that moment? Scared to death. It wasn't fear of death, but that everything could go wrong, that they'd find me before I could leave. What did you think you'd do after escaping? Honestly, I didn't know. I just wanted to breathe, wanted to wake up in the morning without fear. I remembered every detail of that night. The street was empty, only lanterns softly lit the wet asphalt. My heart pounded so hard it seemed the whole city could hear. I checked documents, money, bag. Everything was ready. Every move thought out, every turn of the route planned. I got in the car and started the engine. Midnight on the clock. Ahead, uncertainty. I drove past bars and restaurants where we met with Frankie and Salvatore. Everything looked normal, but for me, it was a farewell tour. I didn't stop, didn't look back. This was my moment. The first days after the escape were like a dream. I changed hotels, routes, stayed invisible. Every phone ring made me freeze. But gradually, a sense of freedom appeared. I could breathe deeply. I could walk the streets without expecting someone around the corner. I settled in a small town in Colorado. House with a garden, dog, work that brings peace. No one knows who I am. Sometimes I think about the past. Sometimes I hear familiar names in the news or local talks, but I understand. This is a different life now. Questions from Reddit. Did you ever go back to your old life? No, I look back and understand that's not my path. My life there ended. Are you afraid they'll find you? Sometimes, but I know. If I'm careful and don't seek conflict, the chance is close to zero. What did you learn? That freedom is the most precious thing, and sometimes you have to lose everything to understand that. I'm writing this to share my experience. Not for fame, not for heroism, just so someone understands. Even in a world with no rules and no safety, you can find a way out. My life now is quiet. I grow vegetables, walk the dog, drink coffee, and smile. But I'll never forget those streets, those people, and those nights that made me who I am. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear familiar footsteps on the wet cobblestones of New Jersey.